Okay. I'd like to discuss. I'd like to discuss the smag has a mitzvah on the posig mitvar sheket tirchok. The smag is moine this mitzvah, and the Rambam isn't. And I just wanted to, or doesn't, and I'd like to discuss what the issue might be. So maybe a priori, and we'll see some achronim actually learn like that, that the mitzvah of mitvar tirchok, mitvar sheket tirchok, is not a separate mitzvah, but it's a prat in the mitzvah b'serek tishbar hamisecha. And therefore the Rambam quotes the dinim, brings the dinim of mitvar sheket tirchok in the when he's talking about the mitzvah b'serek tishbar hamisecha. In Perek Chaf Aleph of Hilchos Sanhedrin, that's the Perek of b'serek tishbar hamisecha, he also talks about mitvar sheket tirchok. In Perek Chaf Aleph Halacha Zayin and Yud, v'chein bal din muzer shelo yashmiya dvorov ledayan koydem shiavoy bal din chaveiro v'gam al zeh ukiyetzi boy nem mitvar sheket tirchok minayin ledayan shelo yaseh melitz dvorov bein shel bal din, someone in between, and you're not hearing them directly, shnem mitvar sheket tirchok. And then Mr. Yucham Purla learns like this in his view on this Sefer HaMitzvos of Aseh in Aseh Chof Beis v'chein ma shedorshu hosam minayin l'dayin shel yishma divrei bal din koydem shiova bal din chaveiroi Talmuloima mitvar sheket tirchok hainu mishum daridei kach bo lodun shaloi b'tzedek uma shedorshu minayin lebaldin shaloyatin dvorov ledayin kol mishyov baldovo l'chbaldo mechaver talmud mitvar sheket tirchok hainu mishum b'kach goyim ledayin lodun shaloi b'tzedek. So that's what he learns. That it's a problem with tzedek tishbar misecha, and it's all the same, or it's a subcategory of it, but it's not a separate mitzvah minyan mitzvahs. I can imagine maybe the other place in Hilchos Sanhedrin that he quotes it, even though it's not in Perek Chaf Aleph, you could make a case or maybe claim that it's also part of tzedek tishbar misecha. In Perek Chaf Beis, Halacha Beis and Gimel, v'chein Talmud shel yoshev lefnei Rabbi v'ros schus la'oni b'chovel la'oshir im shosak harizeh oiver mishum lo segur mipnei ish v'al zeh nema mitvar sheket tirchok. It doesn't sound like it because it comes something like lo segur. Uminayin l'dayin shelo yoshev Talmud bur lefonav Talmud loima mitvar sheket tirchok. Uminayin l'Talmud shelo Rabbi shetoyeh bedin shelo yoyma amtin loy ad shigma din ve'asterenu ve'evneu kedei shikra hadin al shmi tamaloyim v'dvar sheket tirchok minayin l'dayin shu yedei bedin shu merumo shelo yoyma achatachnu v'yei kakol toli b'tzavo edim tamaloyim v'dvar sheket tirchok. So maybe l'chera the dinei talmidim v'dayonim, it's not clear that it's part of b'tzedek tishbar misecha, and the din meruma is also a part of b'tzedek tishbar misecha. You might say that's okay. In Hilchos Sanhedrin, Perek Chaf Daled Halacha Gimel, minayin l'dayin shu yodea bedin shu meruma shelo yoyim achatchenu v'yei hakol tovo b'tzavo edim tamaloyim b'dvar sheket tirchok. Okay, maybe it's the same. But there's a problem. There are two other dinim that the Ram quotes in Mishnah Torah B'Tzedek Tishma B'Secha that it's very difficult to put it into B'Tzedek Tishma B'Secha. Here, I wouldn't have done it, but maybe you could do it. The other cases before. If you look, he quotes in Hilchos Toim V'Nitan and also in Hilchos Eidos. In Hilchos Toim V'Nitan, in Perek Tezayin Halacha Yud, Hoyu Shloisha Noishin Mona B'Echod. B'Kofar Behen, Lo Yiyeh Echod Teveya Ushnayim Me'idin. So someone borrowed from 3 people, and so what happened? This person was kafir, so maybe make one of them a dayan, and one of them should be a teveya, and 2 of them should be edim to take the mana. Mimeno. Baldvoim elu kietze behen hizi akosu v'oma v'ashek tilchot. So it's nothing to do with B'Tzedek Tishma B'Secha. It's people starting to make a whole the splitting up, and the Tevei himself becoming Adam. It's the problem. And you'll find Hilchos Eidos in Perek Yud Zayin Halacha Vav, Oma loy boy v'amoid im ha'ed v'loy toy. Just stand there with the aid and don't give me an aidis. Ke'shira haloiva v'yifached v'yala daitoi she'atem shnei edim v'yoydem atzmo. And I'm causing to be moide. Hari ze also lamoid ulaharis shuhu aid ad af al pi she'ein omeid v'al ze kietze b'nemo midva sheketich l'chos du b'tzei tishma misech. The smag you'll find in Siman Kuf Zayin, and he basically goes down and quotes a long list, probably all the cases, and he probably is trying to prove it's not a peculiar din in B'Tzedek Tishma B'Secha, but it applies. It's a separate mitzvah. So the question is, what's Pshat in Rambam? So if you look at the Lashon of Rambam, many times he says, "V'Torah hizhir mitvar sheker tirchok." For example, you see in Lois Sagesh Pei Aleph, he she hizhir hashofer shalishmoya divrei echli balei din. Shelo b'fnei bal dinoi, v'hu oma omroi yis'aleh lo'isisa shem hashov, v'loshin mechilta lo'isisa shem hashov, as hora l'dayin shelo yishma b'bal din ad sheyehei bal dinoi imoi, as hora l'bal din shelo yashmias dvor l'dayin ad sheyehei chaver imoi. Ulahazhir mizeh ho'inyan ba'atzmoi omar midvar sheker tirchok kmo shehizboye b'vi mishmuz. And you see this lashon many times also. Minayin v'chein baldin muze shlo yashmir dvor v'dayin koydem shova baldin chaveroi v'gam al zeh kietz b'nem dvar sheker tirchok. So it means that there's ashora. And the many other times in the cases that I mentioned, he talks about he has this lashon his here. So my suggestion over here, I think first of all, it's very difficult to say B'Yucham Pola. The Ram and the other places in Hedron are difficult, but maybe you can swallow it, okay? But the Ram Toim V'Nitan and also in Hilchos Eidos are very difficult. And especially in Sefer HaMitzvos, where he says the Alzeh Hizir, okay, and he seems to say it's out of his whole. So what comes out is, I think the answer is that it's an Isa Aseh. And it's only an Isa Aseh. And there's no kiyum. And this goes together with the Adoimi Umitzri that the Ram quotes at the end of Perek Aleph. At Perek Aleph, there is issues that the Ram says in Isa Aseh. It doesn't count in Minyan HaMitzvos. And what it means is that mitzvahs aseh are only kum v'aseh. Shei ve'al taseh is not Minyan HaMitzvos. And here also, with only ashora, it means that is aseh, it's not Minyan HaMitzvos. And all the time, the Ram quotes, and this is not for us now, in Sefer HaMitzvos, he quotes a lav of Muchal Aseh. He's trying to say that the lav is bo Muchal Aseh. So since it's a derivative of the Aseh, there must be an Aseh. But an Isa Aseh by itself is not minyan. Or he might quote there for other reasons. He might quote lav of Muchal Aseh is an Aseh to say there's no Malchus. But whatever it is, mitvat sheker tirchok is only an Isa Aseh. And that is very good. The Rambam again in Lois Reish Pei Aleph. It's an Isa Aseh. There's no kiyum in it, and that's the Rambam in Hilchos Ishus Perek Aleph Ches v'yesh she'isa bi'ason bi'aseh v'eino mechai v'lav v'shloi shehem mitzri v'adoimi dor rishon v'dor sheni echad tzchon v'echad nekevos. He doesn't count the minyan mitzvah. So what I would suggest here, and I want to talk about this will have to be a separate shiur about this at some time, is that if you can't imagine the flip that the Isa Aseh is a derivative of the Kiyum Aseh, the Mitzvah Aseh, like you can imagine in if Aloy Besula L'Kohen Gadol, because the Kiyum is a Besula Kohen Gadol, you have to ask yourself whether it would apply to the Mechusas Man. You have to ask yourself what would happen in Gadol Pera by Nozir, and other cases also. But in a case like Mitfa Sheker Tirchok, where there's no Kiyum, and in Adoimi Moav and Adoimi and Mitzri, there's no Kiyum, there will be no Mitzvah. It's not Minyan HaMitzvos. The only problem is this is not 100% clear, because you could have said there's an inyan from Richuk, there's a Kiyum in Richuk to Misrachek from Sheker, Mitva Sheker Tilchok. And if you bring a Sheker, you makarev it, it's an Isa Aseh, but it could be there's a Kiyum to Mirachek. And this is not clear what the Hech of the Rambam is to keep on saying his here, his here. Let's continue. Next mitzvah, Kufayin Ches. Mitzvah, Hashmone V'Shivim Umeya Shetzivonu Lohoyid Lifnei Adayonim. Lohoyid is even a tibin. In Kapach, it's limso eso edus. I don't know if there's a big difference. And then al lifnei hadayonim. So l'cheira in all the kisvei yad, it says al hakim, which is basically dayonim. Ibn Tibbon says bebezdin. So l'cheira, you should translate the pirush miluli like kapach and say lifnei hadayonim. So the mitzvah is that the Eidos should say the Eidos of Dayonim, and maybe Ibn Tibbon says what it really means is Bezdin, because Dayonim, that's not Bezdin. You have two Dayonim, it's not Bezdin, it's nothing. And the Ram continues, B'chol ma shenei de'ehu. Whatever we know, yeah. It says here, Shnavil Limso in Kapach, Lifnei Dayonim, B'chol ma she'onu yoidein. So we, Shatziva Shnavino, you see here it's very important the way Kapach translated, because we translated, okay, Sivono, it has to be, we are commanded. That's the translate. Atziva Shenitztavino, we are commanded. So then he translated, B'chol ma she'onu yoidim. We have to give edus on whatever we know. Okay, and Ibn Tibbon b'chol ma shenei de'ehu, but that's in the first person plural because that's the way the mitzvah is formulated. So whatever we know, and then it says bein shia by misas misha edus halav o atzalasai. That's one case. Whether it is a misa or hatzola, hefsim amoinoi hava chasoi. In Kapach, it's bein shohoya bekach mishum ibud hamur olav or hatzolas hamur olav b'mamoinoi oy benafshay. Similar type of thing. Chayovim lohoid b'chol zeh. In Ibn Tibbon, Anachnu Chayovim Lohoid Ze Kuloi Uloidia Adayonim. So here it's interesting. Here, I don't know why in the beginning it's Bezin, here it's Dayon, Uloidia Dayonim. It's a little bit odd. Mashiri'inu oy shamanu. So what's this Mashiri'inu oy shamanu? So I think what he's learning is it says V'hu aid oy ra oy shama. And that's what he's saying. Who aid, colon, what is the topic of the Eidus? Mashuri'inu or Shamanu? I think that's why he's learning the pasuk. Who aid, colon, or ra, Oy Shama. That's the way he's interpreting the pasuk. Now, Let's go slow here. So, first of all, what the Rambam is postulating, there is a mitzvah of Haggadis Eidus, independent of whether it's Mamoin or whether it's Nefoshes. That's what he's talking about. And that's the Rambam in Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph. Rambam Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph, the Eidus, so Eid Mitzuva L'hoyer Bebezdin, B'chol Eidus Sheyivoda, Bein Ve'edus Shechayev Bo Es Chaveroi, Bein Ve'edus Shezakeu, V'hu Shitvenu L'hoyer B'dinim Momris, Shne V'hu Eid Oiro Oyoda Im Lo Yagi V'lo Savoinan. So he adds a new element over here. It's certainly both in the Foshas and Momenos in Hilchos Eidus, but he adds the element of fear. And the Hamik Shaila, the Tziv on his Pirush of the Shiltos, and Shilta Samach Tes, Siv Cotton Bays, he learns that Tfiyah is a T'nai Miyuchot, is a separate T'nai, a special T'nai in Haggadis Eidus Shel Dinim Momenos. And you need Tfiyas Baldovo or Baldin, Shiagid Edusa, that he should say his Eidus. Here he doesn't mention anything about Tfiyah. It could be there's no stira, it could be that Tfiyah is in the Protei Dinim. It's not an integral part of the mitzvah, therefore the Ram doesn't mention it. Maybe. Now, let's continue. V'hinei heviu Rabbeinu Aleim HaSholom Rayosam ala chiyuv Haggadis Eidus me'omroi yis'ale v'hu eid oiro oyoda. He quotes and he says that our sages have brought a proof that there's an obligation for Haggadis Eidus from the Pasuk v'hu eid oiro oyoda. Oyoda. So, first of all, where do our sages say? This is just plain pshat before we get into understanding what he's saying. He says, if that's what it says, is you have to find a place. From this pasuk. So there are at least there's a raya we'll see from the Talmud and a raya from the Mishnah. And the pshat is that the Rabbi Seinu's Matiki Ashmur have a pirush makubal that this pasuk means a mitzvah chiyuv. And these are the places in Shvuos Lamed of Beis, Machlikis Babali Dinim, Avo Be'edin Divakol Be'amido Omalei Hayaseh V'Hayaseh. I say the cover of Torah Odif. So what's Hayaseh V'Hayaseh? The mitzvah Haggadis Eidus is B'Amida Dafka, but the mitzvah is not the Amida. The mitzvah Haggadis Eidus. So that's one proof that there's a mitzvah in the Gemara says, the Matiki Ashmur said there's a mitzvah Haggadis Eidus. The second place is in the Mishnah Sanhedrin. Perek Daled Mishnah Hey. B'Shem HaToimu. Malon ulitzora hazeis. V'haloi kvar ne'emar. V'hu eid oiro oyoda. Im lo yagid v'goymer. So you get the impression, Malon ulitzora hazeis. So he means he's obligated to come. And that you find also the Ram in Hilchos Shvuos. In Perek Hey, Halacha Yudal Tezvov, V'chein Mash Nishba, Levatel Es HaMitzvah, Levatel Es HaMitzvah, Bitel Poto Mishvur. It says Levatel Es HaMitzvah. What does that mean? There's a key. There's a kumvasei. Look at Mishum Shvur Shov, V'yoisa HaMitzvah, Shenishba Levatelo, Ketzad, V'chein Nishba Lechaveru, Shloi Oid, L'cho Edus. There's a mitzvah, and he's Nishba Levatel Es HaMitzvah. O Shloi Oid, L'cho. Im Eda L'cho Edus, Harei Ze Loike, Mishum Shvur Shov. Okay. So we have very clear the Matiki Ashmur, and he quotes, and he's quoting Gayasam Rabbeinu, referring to the various places that the Chachmei HaMesorah quoted this pasuk, and it was clear that there was an obligation to do something, and that means a mitzvah say. And especially the Gemara Shavuos, that clearly says it's a mitzvah. Now, let's backtrack. One of the early, one of the Kadmonim, the Birkei Yosef quotes him in Choshen Mishpat Simon Chav Chesed Katan Aleph, beginning of Hilchos Eidos. He says, "Vayhei Maharash Yoina." He quotes, "V'yesh l'daktek the mehechon lomdu the mitzvah say lahoyed." How do you know there's a mitzvah say lahoyed? Dilma im lo yagid dafka v'nos avoynoi. It means if it's only an isa say, there's no kiyum, there's no kumva say. It's only if you shave out kasa, there's an isa. That's his question. So I want to tell you one thing. The Rambam agrees with Ma'ashayna. The Hainu, that if you're looking at the pasuk itself, there's no reason to conclude that it's a mitzvah minyan mitzvahs. Because you could say that it's only Nis Aseh. Comes the Rayis, Rabbi Seino Alei HaMasholem, that interpret that there's a Kum Vaseh, so it's a Rayidach that's not only Nis Aseh, it's Rayidach, maybe, I don't know if there is an Nis Aseh, but certainly, probably, maybe there is, we'll worry about that later, but certainly it's a Kum Vaseh, and that's the mitzvah. And that's the Ram's answer. The Ma'ashayna was correct. From the pasuk itself, you can't prove anything. It's only, and that's how the Ram was medaktik, Rabbi Seinu Alei HaMasholem. Now he goes on, the Rambam, V'oive al mitzvah V'hu sheyichpoish edusoi, oy oinshoy godoi, oy chetoy godo, v'hu omro yis'ale, im lo yagid, v'nosa avoinoi. So derech agav, the Rambam doesn't quote im lo yagid, v'nosa avoinoi when he's talking about the kiyum. He quotes it later separately. See, the Ma'ashayna says, oh, maybe it's only an Isa say, because the pasuk says, so the answer is that that's not where the Ram's quoting it from. The Ram's quoting from the other pasuk, and it's taka no raya, and it's only the Matiki Ashmur. So the question is, the Ram says, Einshe Godoi, a Cheta Godol, that the pshat is he's talking about Korban, B'Shvuos Eidos. The Ram hasn't mentioned Shvuah later. The Ram will mention Shvuah afterwards. That's for all Eidos. the Imhoisa, or Edis Shikovish, or Edis Momon, the Chishba Vanishba, then it's Korban. So this case is completely independent of Shvur. And that's the Oinshe Godo, Avoino Godo, Cheto Godo. Okay. Now, so here, I'm not sure that I would have said that a korban is a cheto gadol. I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but cheto gadol, oinshe gadol. When we're talking about the einish itself, oinshe gadol, cheto gadol. So I found maybe this is like a Yehuda B'Beseira, a Tesefta in Shavuos. Rabbi Yishmael Oimer, v'nosa avoinoi, korban. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Oimer, that's v'nosa avoinoi. He says korban one time now. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Oimer, nema kan v'nosa avoinoi. V'nema lahalon v'nosa avoinoi. Ma avoinoi. Yisa, ha'omo lahalon, netilas neshama. There's something to do with life and death. Netilas neshama. Af avoinoi yisa ha'omo kan netilas neshama. So that's the avoinoi godoi and the oinshe godoi. Maybe that's shutting up. Now, so both here, so what Ramme said, there's an Aseh, right? Correct? So maybe the Ramme had another proof that it should be a lava bo mechlal Aseh. So the answer is this question is absolutely ridiculous. Because the lava bo mechlal Aseh is you start from the Aseh and you derive from it the Isa. Here, if the Rambam splits the pasuk and it says Vu Eid oy ro oy shoma, and then it says V'mlo yagid lo savoinoi, you're not deriving it. It's not a derivation. The Isa says Mefushim pasuk V'mlo yagid lo savoinoi. So you can't postulate a mitzvah say from a pasuk, and that's exactly the Mahashir's question. So to say this is ridiculous. Okay. Let's continue. Now, over here, we says, "V'hu amro yisalim lo yagiv nos avoyna v'dove zeh kloli" is means bein edus of mamoin beidus nefoshes. But if it's edus mamoin and has a shvua, v'chichesh bo v'nishba olav chayiv korban oile v'yored. So I'm confused, but maybe, it's not. I ask a very simple question. The question is like this. The person who's nishba, shvuas edus, and he brings the korban, okay, over the earth. So I ask you, what Isa does he violate? To violate an Isa Shvur, or the Isa is Im lo yagid v'nos avoinai. See, if it's an Isa Shvur, what does the Ram quote it? What does that do with the mitzvah of Avodah Seidus? If the Mechayiv is the mitzvah Avodah Seidus, but a t'nai in the chiyuv korban that there's a shvur, so I understand. But if the mechayiv is the shvur, we don't understand why the Ram is quoting it over here. However, this is not conclusive at all, because if you go to Aseh Ayin Beis, the Ram does just the opposite a priori. Mitzvah Ayin Beis is the mitzvah korban oil v'yorei. He shetzivonu shenaktiv korban oil v'yorei al chatoyim miuchodim gam kein v'chatoyim sheischayev ha'odom aleihem ze hakorban heim v'chulei. And I'm just taking the list, focus on what's important for us. Ushvur sa'edus v'chulei oy nishba l'sheker shvur sa'edus bein b'shoigi bein b'mezen. So he's talking about nishba l'sheker shvur sa'edus. So you get the impression mechayiv is the shvur. This is very confusing. The two Rambams over here, and this mitzvah get the impression it's part of the mitzvah go to Seidus. In the mitzvah korban v'yorei, you get the impression it's a problem of shvur. Next, mitzvah kuf ayin tes. HaMitzvah atesha v'shivim umeya. He shetzivonu lachko edus ho'edim. Edus ho'edim v'lidrosh oiso heitev. Ushe v'achakach nishpoit hadin v'nechayev o'emes. So there's a seder. The mitzvah is to do a drish of chakira and then to be shofet and the chayev o'emes. That's the way Ibn Tibbon translates it. Okay. He translates should not take naflik bezeh betachlis yicholteinu. Okay, before this, excuse me. The achakach nishpoid adim lechay ba'emes. Kapach says v'oz nafil es ha'oinesh v'nechay v'sadin. So you have to know what this is saying exactly. But he's talking about not the diyun of Bezdin, but the Einish itself. But it tends to be twice, and I have to work on that after they talk to see exactly how you should translate this. But whatever it is, before your shofet or before there's a Gemal Din, there has to be drisha v'chakira heitev. The Lashon here, I have to also think about this. The plain reading, which I think is very difficult, Lachko edus o edim v'lidrosh oiso heitev. Is the heitev only go on drishis and not a chakiris? And if so, there's sheva chakiris and there's no inti moisiv on the chakiris, whereas in the drishis, whatever your moisiv is, how is a meshubach? I'm not sure exactly what happened here. This needs work. Then he continues, Shenaflik bezeh betachlis yicholtenu. Ushinedaktik, that's Ibn Tibbon. Kapach shenedaktik bekach b'chol efsher. So l'chayra, it goes on everything. So I'm not sure if you can medayik this case that lachkira is not like that, because the way of naflik, so I'm confused. Kidei, Then he says, very strange, almost timey HaMitzvos here. Kidei shelo nishpoit hadin. I assume nishpoit hadin means to come to conclusion. Gemal din betchilas dibo b'mehirus v'nomis hazakai. So that's very strange. Ibn Tibbon has committed the Rambam that Drish Kira is by Misa, only by the Nefoshes, I would assume. And I'm not clear there's something in the Arabic to support this. And if you look in Kapach, he translates it, Nachreitz HaMishpot b'dibo rishon b'hirus v'neira lezakai. You do something bad, doesn't killing him, it's something bad to him. According to Kapach, it could also be in Eidos, it's b'chol Eidos. Then he says, Kedei shelo nishpoit adin b'tchilas dibo b'mehirus. No, what's Kedei shelo nishpoit? So l'chayot a tam HaMitzvah. But this is very odd. We know the place of Taimi HaMitzvah is in Moreh Nevuchim. We have no clue and don't know at all from the Ram's Hakdama to Sefer HaMitzvos, Nakdama to Minyan HaMitzvos, that one of the purposes, the matorot of Sefer HaMitzvos, of Matoros HaSefer, is Levaya Taimi HaMitzvos. So the question is, what does he want over here? But anyway, the tam Kedei shelo nishpoit hadin betchilas dibo b'mehirus v'nomis onera hazakai. It'll give us a chance to do things properly. So a priori, you would have said this is something like the chinuch. The chinuch in this mitzvah in Tov Samach Gimel, u'miseid inyan zeh omu zechaynu levocha havim mesunim badin. Vakol leman nisyashiv al adovo v'neida boy kol ha'emes v'lo niye nimhorim bedin penomis hazakai oinafsi memoine ba'alomas ha'emes. So this sounds like he's interpreted the Rambam is saying over, or you would assume maybe the Rambam is saying over the Mishnah Novis. However, maybe he is, but the Rambam Pirush HaMishnah in Ovis is not like that. The Pashta Rambam Pirush HaMishnah in Ovis is there's no relationship between Jewish Chakira and the Mishnah in Ovis. It's a separate din. The Rambam there in Perek Aleph Mishnah Aleph of Nesunim Badin. It's about that the Gemal Din should not be on a flip and a second, just a capricious decision. You have to think a lot about it. The chinuch presents it. You could have imagined that's what the Rambam's doing over here, and that maybe it's the chinuch is learning a shot in the Rambam. Then maybe he's disagreeing with what he says in the Pirush HaMishnah. Just for the record, it's very clear in the Rambam that Drish Chakira applies even to Dinim Momenos. It's just Xela. Echod Perek Gimel V'chos Eidos Alocha Aleph. He says, Echod Dinim Momenos V'echod Dinim Nefoshes B'Drish Chakira. Shnema Mishpat Echod Yeh Lochem. Avo Omu Chachamim Kedei Shelo Tina Delos N'Dei Belovim Ein Eidei Moment Tzrichin Drish Chakira. Okay, now the Rambam says, "Vu Amra Yisraeli," quotes a pasuk, "V'dorashta v'chokarta v'sha'alta heitev v'hine emes nochain hadover." Why is the Rambam quoting "v'hine emes nochain hadover"? What does it add here? So I have two options. One possibility is the Rambam wants to say we have chakiros and drishos. There's also bedikos. So maybe the Rambam wants to say that bedikos are also in the mitzvah. It mefurish Sifri, and Stam Sifri is a Pirush Mekubal. V'darashte v'chakarta v'sha'alta heitev Michal Shnema v'hugel l'chov shamata v'darashte heitev l'gzeir shova Melamed sheboit kino isai v'sheva chakiros b'dikos minayin talmaloima v'nei emes nochan adova im seifenu l'rabos b'dikos ma talmaloima chakiros Oma echad eni yodei but they say, what's the difference? And he explains it. Okay, Perek Aleph, the Ram also in Perek Beis, Haloch Aleph and Beis. I'm not sure I would go like this because to quote this pasuk without the Sifri and to say that he's alluding to B'dikos is very odd. So I have a second option. The Rambam is explaining that v'dorashta v'chakarta v'sha'alta heitev has to be b'mesinus in order to create v'hine emes nochon hadover. Should be mesinus b'kabdonis to make v'hine. And the Rambam, the reason why he quotes the time of the mitzvah is because it's not stated in the pasuk. Kidei, and the Rambam, all the Rambam is doing, he's not saying over the Sifri, he's saying over that v'hine emes nochan adov in pshuta shomikra is explaining why we are malve in drishes and chakiros. Kidei, as he says, kidei shelo nifshei hadin betchilas hadin b'mehilas b'nomes hazakai, but you should make sure that the aid is 100%. To understand and make sure they're bona fide, proper Eidim, and to understand the Eidus, and to get it right. And that's v'hine nochon adovo k'dei sheloi nishboi hadin beziris b'mehiris v'nomes hazakai. And then it's not v'hine emes nochon adovo. That's Pshat Rambam. So that answers the question about timing. And the Rambam is not trying to say Tami HaMitzvos here. The Rambam is saying Pshat and Pasuk. Ukfar hisbaru mishpatei mitzvah zu v'inyoneho or chilukeo, what's chakiris and how the chakiris and what are the chakiris, v'eich yiyu hachakiris, v'eich yiyu adrishos u'ma sheroi b'hafloga b'zeh. And I assume that kapach would translate v'heich chayov l'daktik b'kach. Hafloga means l'daktik. That's the way he translates kapach. Based tiskayim or edus or tevatel edus lefi eloch kirus. Whether the stiris or whether he doesn't answer the kirus, or what exactly happens. But the problem is, both Ibn Tibbon and Kapach translate an Arabic word as chakiris. I find it very odd that the Ram before uses the Hebrew in chakiris and the Hebrew in drishas, and then he uses a different word, v'ech tiskayim or edus o tavatel lefi elu achakiris. So I thought it's a broader Arabic term, or at least the way he's using Arabic, al-taksi, and the Rambam is using this and maybe for all dish tachiris, but he's just trying to say what are the various dinim ech tiskayim with the vatel lefi elu achiris. If they don't answer, they do answer. There's stiris. When do you have to answer? When don't you have to answer? And that the Ram discusses in Hilchos Eibus. Now, let's continue. And he says, and this is in Maseches Sanhedrin. Okay. Mitzvah kuf pei. HaMitzvah hamashlima shmonu meya. 180. He shetzivonu shenechayiv min ha'oinish. Kapach lahatil oinish alo edim. Be'edim she'idu sheker. So Ram just makes a very simple statement. Be'edim she'idu sheker. K'moy ma shechoshvu la'asdais be'edusa. So it means lefinu shnechayev min ha'oinish. Be'edim she'idu sheker. So if you take the Ram literally, that the Mechayiv is Eid Sheker, the Choy should end up the Bohog Bogaglov should also Mechayiv. But the Ram is very clear, and the Gemara, Ram Perikil Hilchos Eidus, and Perik Yud Ches Haloch Aleph, Mish Eid B'Sheker, V'noida Be'edim Shehid B'Sheker, Zeo Nikla Eid Zoyim. The Chesed Eid Zoyim is Noida Shakrusam Be'eid Derech Edim, not Bohor B'Ragov. There's no hechach. The Ram here in Sefer HaMitzvos agrees. The Ram might be saying a very different thing. The Rambam is not interested in this issue because this is the Protei HaMitzvah, and it's not the place in Sefer HaMitzvos. It could be that the way that you find out the sheker has to be Eid B'Dafka, but that's only Protei HaMitzvos, so it's not the place in Sefer HaMitzvah. He doesn't quote it. And that's what he means at the end. Of the mitzvah, v'echis ames kol ha'edim. How do you know that they're telling the truth? Well, who's telling the truth? Now, kapach is not kol ha'edim. It should be alo ha'edim shehem zaymemin. Echis ames hal ha'edim zaymemin. And that is the Gemara, and that is the case of its edim imono yisem. Now, Then he says something very strange. Okay, let's see. V'hu amroi yis'aleh v'asisim loi kasher zomam lasas b'la'ochel. And that's k'moi shechoshvu la'asais be'edusa. And he says, v'zehu din edim zomim. What's he talking about? What does he want? V'zehu din edim zomim. It's the din edim zomim. Truth is, he does a similar thing in Kuf Pei Aleph. V'zehu, in the mitzvah is Hitch Tevonu B'Arifas Ha'egla, and then he says V'zehu Din Egel Arufa. So you have to know what he wants. What does it mean Din? He wants to say that's what we call a shrana. There's no chiyuv. That's very difficult to say because the Ram over here in Kuf Pei says clear it's an amal in the mitzvah of Basisim L'Kasher Zoma, and also the mitzvah Arifas Egla. He also says amal. So we're in a quandary over here. The Ram on one hand says the din, both Kuf Pei and Kuf Pei Aleph. We don't know what's going on. We don't know why it's called a din, because the chayot's a bona fide chiyuv. And then, a priori, I would have said, Vasisim L'Kasher Zomon is B'chal Ein Shei Bezdin. So, if that's the case, he should have put it together with Ein Shei Bezdin. So maybe you say, no, he put it over here because since the din made Mzoimim only come through Kiris, so he puts it right after Mitzvah Kufayim Test. It's possible, we have to know. Then he finishes. He goes like this. I don't think Labid Momoin Noivad Lohem Kamois. It's not to destroy the Momoin if they gave Aedis to take away Momoin. So we should take away Kamosa. V'im from them. V'im Heidu V'ma. She's Chayimisa, Namisa Moisa, Oisa Misa from the Abba Misa's bed, and you pick the one that they wanted. V'meidu, v'mashi Chayimalkus, Nauke Oisam. So understand what this means? We'll come back to this in Mitzvah Hashem. Ukvar isparu mishpatei mitzvazo, umashi is chadish bo mehashelois. What questions you have to ask? Mehashelois. Know what that means. Kufei Aleph, he says, Nisbao ukva nisbao dinim mitzvah zo ba'shelois shenischachu bo v'ketzad yizbarer al ha'edim she'em zoymimin k'dei shenodu noisam b'din zeh b'meseches Marcus. So Mitzvah Hashem, we'll pick this up next week. Just an introduction to the mitzvah.